Hey, Eagle fans, Villanova fans, Philadelphia fans, college basketball fans, anyone who wants to go ahead and see what I think about the NCAA tournament. I decided to do something different this year. I'm going to do a prediction video for the NCAA tournament, filling out my bracket, letting you know who I think is going to end up winning the national championship. Just so you know, the way I do my brackets is I actually start sort of from the inside and move out. So, for instance, the first thing I do is I try and identify the 4 teams I think are going to make the Final Four. I think that sometimes people get hung up on matchups in later rounds that might not end up happening because obviously one of the teams that they've picked to get there has lost earlier. So I try and take a look at who I think the teams that are most likely to make the Final Four, and then I sort of do each individual bracket from there. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do today. Just so you know, the Final Four that I have, obviously, I'm going to go ahead and pick Villanova to win the Eastern region. I've got Arizona winning the Western region. I've got Kansas winning the Midwest region, and I have UCLA winning the South region. So those are my 4 regional champs. With that, we'll go ahead and take a look at how those regions break down.
So with those 4 teams as my Final Four, this is how my bracket starts, and from there, let's move to the East bracket. So in the Eastern Regional, I have Villanova getting to the Final Four, like I said. The next step in this, when I do the actual individual regions, I try and figure out who the Final Four of each region is going to be, or the Sweet 16 representatives. In the 5-12 part of the bracket, I actually have UNC Wilmington getting through to the Sweet 16, and that's because I have East Tennessee State upsetting Florida in the first round. And of course, I have UNC Wilmington beating Virginia in the first round. 12 seeds routinely get upsets in the first round. And when I pick up some of these bigger upsets, the one thing I always try and do is pick an upset where maybe I don't think teams are going to get that far. I don't think Florida and Virginia are going to get that far. So even if they do, ultimately, one of those teams does get to the Sweet 16, I don't think either one of them is advancing beyond that. So I don't really have to worry about losing anything down the road by picking some of these upsets here. For the lower half of the bracket, I have the 3-seed Baylor getting through, and I have the 2nd-seeded Duke getting through. So that's the Sweet 16 representatives I have in the Eastern Regional. For the other games in the first round, I have Wisconsin beating Virginia Tech, I have SMU beating USC, and I have Marquette beating South Carolina. One word of note on the Wisconsin-Villanova matchup, I think Villanova really sort of got the short end of the stick with this one because Wisconsin is a lot better than an 8 seed. They probably really should have been a 6 or maybe even a 5 seed as well as they had played this year. And the fact that they're an 8 seed, I think, is really, it's not fair to them and it's not fair to Villanova either because they shouldn't have to play a number 1 seed in the second round. And we shouldn't have to play a team that's as good as Wisconsin in the second round. So both teams are sort of getting the short end of the stick on that one. I think Villanova can still win, but I do think that Wisconsin will be a tough matchup. And I actually think they're probably the toughest matchup that we potentially have in this bracket, other than who I think will play probably in the finals, and that's Duke. So I do see a regional final where Villanova meets Duke at Madison Square Garden. I think that's a great game. That's going to be potentially a really enjoyable matchup to watch. I really hope Villanova wins that game if that does happen, because as much as I love Villanova, I also hate Duke just as much. So if we were to lose to Duke, it would be a double whammy for me. So I really hope that if that does happen, that Villanova does win and advance to the Final Four for the second year in a row. Moving on to the Western region, I had said I had Arizona coming out of this region for the Final Four. As it relates to who gets to the Sweet 16 in this region, I've got Gonzaga, the number 1 seed, getting to the Sweet 16. Out of the 4-5 region of the bracket, I have West Virginia getting to the Sweet 16. And then, once again, there's always one part of the region that sort of falls apart, and I have that happening here. Xavier getting to the Sweet 16, upsetting Maryland. And then, and that's because I've got Florida Gulf Coast upsetting Florida State in the first round. Always look for some of these bigger upsets in the first round. I think Florida State's one of the weaker 3 seeds that are out there. So for that reason, I've gone ahead and picked them to get beat by Florida Gulf Coast. The rest of the first round matchups, I have Northwestern beating Vanderbilt. I have Notre Dame beating Princeton, and I have Virginia Commonwealth beating St. Mary's. And then finally, the last part of the region to fill out is the final team in the Elite Eight. I have Gonzaga beating West Virginia to get to the Elite Eight and facing off against Arizona in the regional final. So like as I had in the Eastern region, I have the 1 seed and the 2 seed meeting up to face off in the Western regional final. Then Arizona I have winning and getting to the Final Four. For the Midwest region, obviously I have Kansas getting to the Final Four. Moving on from there in terms of teams that I think will also make it to the Sweet 16. In the 4-5 part of the bracket, I have Iowa State, the 5 seed, advancing. I have the 3-seeded Oregon Ducks going from the 3-6 area. And then at the bottom of the bracket is one of the places where I have an upset. I have 7-seeded Michigan advancing. It's not because I'm going to take Louisville. I'm going to take an upset against Louisville in the first round. I will take Louisville in the first round. I typically don't like picking 15 seeds over 2 seeds. Matter of fact, I don't think I've ever taken it. I know it's happened occasionally, but it's very rare. So I usually automatically advance all the 2 seeds against 15 seeds. I'm going to take some other upsets, though, in this first round. I'm going to take Vermont over Purdue, so the 13 seed over the 4 seed. And I'm also going to take Rhode Island over Creighton, so the 11-seeded Rhode Island over 6-seeded Creighton. And then the final first-round game in the Midwest region, I like Miami over Michigan State. And to close out the Midwest region, I do like Oregon to advance to the Elite Eight to go up against Kansas, and then obviously Kansas moving on to the Final Four out of the Midwest region. Finally, for the South region, like I said, I have UCLA getting to the Final Four out of this region. Looking at the other teams for the Sweet 16, I have North Carolina, the top seed, also getting to the Sweet 16. In the 4-5 region of the bracket, I have Butler getting to the Sweet 16. And then for the bottom part of the bracket, I have Kentucky, the number 2 seed, getting to the Sweet 16. For first round games, I do have a couple upsets in this region. I have Kansas State, the 11 seed, upsetting the 6-seeded Cincinnati. And I also have Middle Tennessee State, the 12 seed, beating the 5 seed Minnesota. There's always one of these 12 seeds that beats the 5 seeds, and that's what I have here. And then for the 8-9 and 7-10 games, I have Seton Hall beating Arkansas in the 8-9 matchup, and in the 7-10 matchup, I have Wichita State beating Dayton. The final slot in this region for the Elite Eight, I do have an upset here. I have Butler beating North Carolina to get to the regional final. Butler is a really solid team. They obviously are pretty good. They beat Villanova this year. They beat them twice. So they are a pretty good all-around team. I think that they can beat really anybody in the field. They're probably one of the better 4 seeds that are out there. So for that reason, I do have them upsetting North Carolina and preventing them from reaching the regional finals, which would mean that North Carolina is the first number 1 seed that I have to go down. And then Butler, of course, facing off against UCLA in the South Regional Final, which then I have UCLA winning and going to the Final Four. I will say this about this particular bracket. If you'll notice, I have the 1, 2, 3, 4 seeds all getting to the Sweet 16 in this particular bracket. But the one thing that about this particular bracket, this was the hardest one for me to pick the Final Four representative out of, because I could see any of these 4 teams getting out of this region to get to the Final Four. I think all of them are that good. And if these 4 teams all make the regional, make it to the regional semis or the Sweet 16, this is going to be probably the best regional games that you're going to have. So I think that this really is a bracket to watch for really what could be some really interesting games if this bracket were to hold.
So there you have it. There's my prediction for each individual region. In terms of once they get to the Final Four, the way I see things working out, I see Villanova and Kansas making the finals. And then, of course, I've got Villanova winning the whole thing. Big surprise. I think they can repeat, but by no means do I think they absolutely will repeat. I think that this is one of those years where really there's a lot of different teams that could end up winning this thing. It should be a real fun ride to go through. If you want, I'll go ahead and give you one last look at my final bracket. There it is. So leave your comment below. Let me know who you think is going to make the Final Four. Let me know who you think is going to win the national championship. I do a lot of tweeting throughout the tournament, especially during the Villanova games. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, there's a link in the description below. If you're new to this channel, I do a lot of stuff about Eagles. Obviously football, if you can tell based on the channel, that's sort of what I do. So go ahead and subscribe, and I'll be doing videos as we go into the rest of free agency and leading up to the draft, giving my thoughts on that. But as we go through the tournament, let's march Nova.